Happy Wealth Wednesday. Anna, I'm so excited to have you here today to talk about the bridge that you're bringing to real life behaviors and proof of payment into proof of ownership and title. I love the project you're working on now, Olin, and also just your history as a co-founder and venture investor over time. So I would love to just kick it off with you sharing a little bit about where you're calling in from today and what you're working on these days.
So currently I'm in Barcelona, and I spend most of my time in US, but I believe like one has to keep its global sense of things. And we have a headquarters here in Barcelona, but like our team is spread between Canada and US. We also have team across Eastern Europe and Barcelona. All in Genesis starts with the belief that people's wealth is not only based on what they have in their bank accounts, and it's also based on anything they own. And we try to bring that transparency and making them aware that like that has a certain hidden value. By saying that, it's not that they effortlessly have to bring an inventory. We actually want to facilitate that, but them claiming ownership at the time of purchase.
Really cool. I can't wait to dive into that because as you were sort of sharing and we were talking about it, that idea of, the real or the rent the runways where you're like moving these physical products, but like how you would actually, validate ownership of some of those things on chain. I'm so excited to like dive into what you're up to. Our first question we kind of ask everybody that's very equalizing is, what was your first ever investment? Do you remember what your first, maybe even traditional investment was, who got you started, and what your first crypto investment was?
Well, my first investment was actually time. And it was not in exchange of money, it was in exchange of opportunity, Like I invested my time in believing that there's something beyond like what society tells us that like we can be useful for. I did invest in crypto, and my first investment was Bitcoin, of course. But beyond that, I believe that investment as per se was like diving in through my time in everything that had to do with Web3.
And how and why did you end up getting into your space? You shared a little bit about your background working in APIs and business intelligence. How did it go from there, and also even fashion, into now this world of registration of products and proof of title?
Like anyone else, I had a crisis identity every single now and then, right? And by background, I'm an engineer, but I know that very early on when I started like diving into entrepreneurial areas, I wanted to feel useful for real. Like I'm not that like I want any fame out of it, but just like to understand like any single effort I'm applying to something, it will give certain results for anyone out of there. Like anyone in the space. That I always suffered that like every time I had to pitch somebody, like my story will not make sense because it was no linear. Like I will go from healthcare to fashion to APIs to government work with data and all that stuff, and I will feel ashamed. I'm like, well, there's no consistency, no one will want to understand it. But as I'm exposed to Olin, I'm like, every single one of these experiences actually makes sense because opens up my mind, and I can finally connect the dots about things that are beyond like a very particular linear logic. What once was like something like I will feel like sort of ashamed of, right now it's kind of like not I'm proud of, but I'm like, well, it made sense. Like one has to experience a lot of things from, being poor, being like, struggling, like so I think like I understand more the meaning of why certain things matter, of the way people behave towards crypto today.
What role do you feel you're playing in the wealth space now, and why is it important related to this idea of how your payments turn into value?
To me, it always was fascinating the understanding like when I swipe that card, people will see like I'm paying for something, I'll get that back. And in the moment you have like this, how ecstasy, like, it's like I'm experiencing, like I get this thing where, but afterwards you just hang it and you've been through the moment. So why payments feel that way? So for me, it was always like, hey, what if payments are just like a bet, constant bet? Like I bet that I'm going to this guy's concert and they're nobody today, but 2 years from now, they're going to be somebody. Can I tokenize that moment, that decision? Payments became a vote of understanding what I believe that that's something value in the future. So I buy this because it's more valuable above other things. But for me, what was important is like, okay, but how can that be transacted in the future? Why things I buy should not just end when I buy them, but their lifetime can be extended, right? Because what might mean nothing to me might be gold to others. For us, as Olin was like, hey, we want to make people capture ownership when they build something. But ownership means like, first of all, we have to identify that thing you purchase. And our thought went beyond that. So once I purchase that thing, now actually I can transform it into a digital package where manuals and guarantee and any other thing that is attached to it should not be printed anymore. It's part of the thing. And that's when the sustainability and circular economy came across as a very strong tone to this initiative. As in order for people to be participant of circular economy, we should make it easier for them to make those things be circular.
What do you think has been the most exciting thing you've learned that you would want others to know about, ownership in this digital world?
One of the things I learned is the interpretation of value. And only going through a startup, when you go through a startup and you gotta like patent things by law, it's like I never thought like my imagination, it's valuable. Like, hey, I imagine something, I go and explain it, I frame it to some graphs. But that's a value. For now, a lot of people will criticize and perception of NFTs as something limited to JPEGs and digital content that can be owned, but like can go beyond and like it's an NFT and like look what Bored Apes are like doing. What I realized is like, oh my God, this is portable fame. I want to get rid of my fame. It's not attached to my face. It's attached to this monkey and it's worth something. All my efforts to make this monkey be famous and like whatever, it's portable. And I can just sell it and it's not attached to who I am as a person, right? And for me, it opened my mind. I was like, wow, this is a new way of seeing things that it's not the way I perceived things before about owning things. I can own fame, but it can be transferable. I can own knowledge, but it can be transferable or it can be fractional. And that's what kind of struck me of seeing like society should know that what you own today is a house, is a car, is a vehicle, is art, but you don't own any of titles of any of the like anything else aside from those things. But what if you own titles of the like anything like a sofa, like furnitures, electronics, right? Imagination, right? What if those things were like seamless, be owned by the way you act, right? And by your interactions as a track record of your existence and your behaviors in life, but you got a legacy of things, right?
I'd be curious if there's a person or a company that's really inspiring your imagination right now. What's lighting you up out in the world where you're like, that's really, cutting edge?
My passion was like seeing like how Craigslist like made like a meeting place in internet for in between seekers and providers, like. And one of the things like marked my life was like that sort of chart that like you will see all the companies that came out of Craigslist, like Uber, Behance, like all this. So I was like, what the hell, like, oh my God, out of a one platform, all these companies, they're like more than 1 billion unicorn worth, right?
So what advice would you give to somebody getting started, especially in this land of imagination, which can feel really overwhelming? What advice would you give?
One of the things I've seen people mistaking the most is taking a position where they will interpret and assume how people will think about things. I remember like early on when I would talk 4 years ago about people wanted to own things. It's like, why would people want that? Why would people even like, people get a receipt, they're like, then they move on with their lives. Like, why? Right? So one of my rules were like, when you do something, don't ever try to interpret, because when you interpret it's almost like an ego act of like, that's what I will think of things. And that's what the world is. When OpenSea and like NBA Top Shot proved to be the biggest marketplace in history, right? In such a short time. I mean, not even myself, I could understand what was going on, even though I knew this was like something about like, collectibles and everything. But somewhere out there was somebody that saw something I wasn't seeing it. And there was somebody that believed in something I didn't believe at that time and made that happen. And it proved a major behavior that right now is a trend topic, right? Everybody, like every single brand right now wants to follow because like NFT is top trend of a tech, right? Like activity to doing and like be part of the evolution. Try to play science fiction in moments such this ones, right? Snow Crash had like a big impact. Like Snow Crash was like a good book. And
Couldn't agree more. I'm such a fan of science fiction, and I think as we're world building in this new digital space, it's such an incredible skill to build. So we can build skills like data analysis or marketing, but actually science fiction, the skill of imagination is a very powerful one. So I'm so grateful for you taking the time and sharing your story today. It's been really special. How else can we keep in touch with you personally, and then also Olin, as you guys build out this future that you're imagining?
Personally, with me getting in touch, humbly, like anyone who wants, like, I'm LinkedIn needs a name, right? Like I'm very searchable. But if everyone has to search, like, better search Olin, right? And if they gotta search me is to ask me about science fiction, right? And financials mostly.
Fantastic. Well, we'll definitely be following along, and we'll link all your information, both your LinkedIn and Olin, in the transcript of this interview. And yeah, thank you so much for everything you're building and being an incredible visionary in the space. It's been great to connect.
Yeah. No, thank you guys for like spending time asking me any questions.